I'll call the February 3rd meeting of the Occupancy Tax Committee to order. Welcome to February. Snow and cold and all things February is supposed to be. I have a motion to accept the minutes of the previous meeting. Supervisor Conover, Supervisor Dickinson, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay. We'll have Fred Monroe go first.
Okay, thank you. I'm here to talk about the festival space. We took this up, I believe it was about 2 months ago. But the festival space is doing well. It's under construction. They're working on the restroom building now. And Mayor Blaze, I thought he was going to be here today, but oh, he just walked into the door. There he is, right there. Right on cue.
Save your bacon again.
Yeah. But Mayor Blaze has been working hard. He has last I knew it was 14 events he has booked right straight through from June 1st to Columbus Day. But each one of the events wants a fence, and we had originally budgeted it as part of the project. But when it looked like the budget was a little tight, we had taken that out. But there's a pretty clear need to restore it, because if we don't have a permanent fence, there's going to have to be a rental of a fence for each one of these events. So this was discussed at the PMEC meeting last week, and an estimate was prepared, and I think everyone has a copy of that. Joan, do they? There's an estimate. There was an estimate of $192,000 for the fence itself, and then for the entrance, there's a plan to have masonry entrance columns, and with the possibility of a banner over the top of the main entrance. And so the total cost of those two elements would be $221,906. And I believe the split is 62% for Warren County, 38% for the village. So that cost for Warren County would be $139,581. And I know the county administrator's got some concerns about impacts on the 2015 budget. So what I would recommend is that that the county, the full board, and this committee consider issuing a serial bond resolution, and then doing bond anticipation notes, and paying them over a 5-year period. And if you did that, the principal would be $27,516 a year. So doing it that way, there'd be no impact on the 2015 budget. The first payment would be due in 2016, and I think it's something that would produce a lot of benefit for tourism for Warren County. Ask the committee to consider it. I don't know, Mayor Blaze, would you have anything to add to that?
Are you anticipating the whole share coming from the county?
Well, I believe the cost share is 62%, 38. So the numbers I just gave would be for the county share of it. Unless I guess it'd be possible for the county to issue the bond for the full amount and then have the village pay their share each year.
That's what we were.
Yeah. I don't know if maybe the county attorney has a comment on that.
I believe we can structure it that way.
You could structure it that way. Yeah, maybe that makes the most sense. So if you did that, then the bond anticipation notes first year would be $221,906.
Repeat that, Fred. How much?
$221,906. It's the total of the two numbers on the bottom of the first page and also on the bottom of the second page.
What would the bond payments be each year?
Well, I did it to 62%. It would be, the first year would be $33,000. That's just on the county share, so you'd have to add, let's see, it would just be $221,906 divided by 5, which is what, about 44,000. 44,000 principal plus interest. I think that's the way you do it, is you pay the principal plus interest each year, so it's not a level payment, so the payments go down each year.
Chairman.
Yeah, Paul?
Supervisor Monroe, the only concern I would have, and I just mentioned this to Martin, is, it may be 5 years, but as you know, the finance law depends on the probable useful period.
Right.
And I'm concerned whether this would fall, I think
Yeah.
there's like a general catch-all that's 3, but it, just in case,
Right.
hopefully it is 5 or longer and it won't be a problem, but it
Right.
could be as low as 3, just so the committee is prepared for that. And, if it was, then the payments would be obviously
Yeah, the
higher.
payments would be higher, yeah.
But I think that when we talked about this originally, the thought is that it could either be paid for out of occupancy tax, or if the funding from the project
Park.
itself were sufficient to cover all the other expenses that we're already covering, plus this, then we would take it out of the park
Right.
project.
I mean, the other alternative that's been discussed, I know in, DPW, was the Westbrook Road parking lot. You know, the revenues are doing very well on that parking lot, and possibly to dedicate some of that revenue to, payments on the fence, because a lot of the revenue will be generated from events at the festival space. But that's something that would have to be decided at DPW.
Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul, how much did we budget under Warren County, in the revision, the supplemental revision for this year? I'm trying to remember, the categories for Warren County. There was the village, there was the town, there were the towns, there was, Queensbury, Bolton, and then there was Warren County.
Not sure I'm following you in terms of.
In the, appropriation that we made, the plan that we adopted, there was a, discretionary category, there.
I think it was 100,000.
It was 100,000 for the town and village.
Oh, on the octax for
Yes,
the,
correct.
the town and the village got 100,000.
Correct. What about Warren County? Warren County had a category there as well.
Warren County is also 100,000.
Warren
Was it
County
100?
was
Okay.
$100,000.
Well, we've spent some of that.
I think we spent some discretionary dollars, during our event discussion, but I think that came out of the discretion. I see Joan shaking her head, yes. There was another category called, budget category called discretionary. But I think that the thinking was on that 100, that, the county would have expenses, at Wood Park and at the fairgrounds and in other venues and events, and that, therefore, in addition to the towns and in addition to the Civic Center and everything else, there also needed to be a category for Warren County. And I don't have the sheet in front of me, but I believe the budgeted amount in that category was 100,000. You have it, ma'am? Thank you very, very much. So, see it here. In fact, it specifically discusses, it specifically mentions the park. Now, that wouldn't be enough budgeted for 2015 to pay for a $200,000 program, but it would, if all or a large part of that were dedicated in some fashion, we might be able to bridge. We'd have to talk to the treasurer. We'd have to sit down with the treasurer on this and talk about how we might be able to do that. And I guess I would suggest that as opposed to some type of borrowing, where the costs and the time associated with the legal processes associated with that type of borrowing. I think we budgeted for something like this. This particular improvement just outstrips the, but we might, for example, be able to, just thinking out loud, we might be able to, should we feel there was sufficient dollars advanced to the, that particular line item, what we otherwise would have budgeted on down the road for next year or whatever, to be able to deal with this now. So I would just offer that as a suggestion.
There's no question that there is sufficient surplus in the occupancy tax if we wanted to advance, if you will, the money this year, say, and not you know, and then obviously don't give it next year. And then maybe a little bit out of the following year type of thing, but yes, you're right, I believe that would work.
And then, we would have to have some discussion with the village as to, what they would be able to do and over what period of time back to the occupancy tax program from whatever resources, they, are choosing to utilize. But they might even be able to factor in, their future allocations, some part of their future allocations to
Mhm.
repay it. I know the
Well, the
South-
village's share would be, if it was all paid in cash, around a little over 80,000.
So if we were to have a, I don't know, 4 year repay back, you know, to the program, I think we could make it work out of existing resources.
Are you talking about paying it back into the occupancy tax fund, or,
Yes.
so it's a loan?
Yeah, it's a way of, just, you know, if we hadn't expended the dollars for this year, when we got into next year, we would have that much more, of course, for the county. So it's just that if the program's brand new, so there's $100 that's been budgeted for this year. But it would seem to me that this type of improvement is exactly what, at least I was thinking about when we were considering that legislation.
Mhm. Especially where you have 14 events already booked.
I think the other thing you have to consider is the parking lot that they're gonna build this year should generate between $50,000 and $100,000. I never understood why that's separated from this whole thing. I mean, the reason they're gonna fill that parking lot up is because you got the festival area. It's gonna get some off-festival area time use, but it's not gonna get much. You're not gonna park out there and walk into the village.
Another possibility would be also, in addition to, the village paying it back, is I suppose that the village could also, given the importance of this project, could also ask for some consideration under discretionary funding. Not necessarily that needs to be shared amongst any number of municipalities, but I could see some amount, some modest amount in that pot could go into, which wouldn't have to be repaid, it would have to be an outright additional grant to the village, to help, bear the cost of such a large improvement. But I think that this idea would take a little bit of, work between you and the treasurer and the mayor and Fred, and then perhaps it could come back to committee. I would propose that, Mr. Chairman, so we don't eat up a lot of time, it could come back to the committee in some form.
Well, we obviously gotta have a fence. That's a given.
I think, you know, Mayor Blaze can speak to that, but I think everyone he has dealt with, all the events, they all say they want a fence, right?
Well,
Yeah.
you have to remember that we're renting a festival space that really isn't a festival space without a fence and a stage. And the staging alone is costing these events up to $6,000 or $7,000 on top of our rental fee, because we don't have a stage. But then if they can't charge, if there's no fence, they can't charge. And last year, the American Music Festival, the fencing was well in excess of $5,000. So most of these events will not come if we don't have that fence in. We're actually scheduled to put it out to bid this week in order to get it in time, believe it or not, so we need to make a decision. You just can't operate a paper, and the first event there is Americade. Americade is rented not only the festival space, but Americade is renting your parking lot, and they need a fence. They will not rent the place without the fence, so that's extremely important.
Yeah, and there is some urgency, 'cause I think the notice is going out to bidders in the near future. And, then you have, 45 days after that, after the bids come in to award. So there is some urgency on it.
Yeah, I'm piggybacking off of Dennis's thought, that the revenues from the parking, I know we need a fence this year, and we need to finance it, and whether we bond it or whether we take it out of the occupancy tax reserves either way. I agree, it needs to be done, but in the future, we need revenues for maintenance. We need, capital projects such as maybe our own stage. And I know a few years back, it was mentioned that the tinsel structure, like they have in Manchester, Vermont, with, it's a relatively inexpensive, the fabric structure, that you see here and there, they look like a tent, but, for many of these activities that we're gonna have to keep them weatherproof, the stage and the bands and the music. So, could we dedicate the funding, this is your idea, I think, Dennis, or an offshoot of it, the funding from the parking be dedicated to maintenance and capital projects?
Jacqueline?
It's budgeted for other purposes, I think,
I was
this
gonna
year.
say,
Yeah.
the concern I have is that when this was set up, it's my recollection that part of it was set up to pay for the improvements in the parking, and then also it was budgeted in the DPW budget. So, it's not to say that you couldn't make changes, but I would recommend that we study what the amount of money, revenues that are coming in are, what our costs are that we're trying to cover, and then, make a decision as to whether or not you feel there's gonna be extra money, for instance, or if you don't want the money going into the DPW fund, then we gotta figure out how we're gonna replace that revenue to offset those costs. That one is just a little bit more complex, and I would certainly, we could certainly study it, and, we'd wanna talk to the DPW committee, I think, as well, because this is part of the DPW funding. It's just the way that was set up. I mean, it didn't have to be that way, but that's the way it was set up years ago. And so now we're kind of like depending on that in terms of our budgeting practices, so that one may take a little bit more time, but it's not to say we couldn't look into it. One suggestion I might have is that due to the urgency, I think you can actually proceed on two paths. You could, today, authorize a serial bond and a bond anticipation note, because that puts in place, all it means is you're gonna adopt the resolution, doesn't mean you're gonna take the bond anticipation note, so all it means is just a resolution which Martin can draft and put before the board, and then, and probably a seeker on that too, I would suspect. But you get that in place, and then in the meantime, we can do exactly what Supervisor Conover suggested, and that is go back and look at our other funding, and if it turns out that we can pull all this together on the OCTAX, then you can always rescind the bond resolution later, because we don't have to borrow on that just because we adopt it, but you do need it in place before the bids are accepted, because you have to be able to point towards a source of funding, but then we can change it. So there'll be time to do that, and I see the treasurer nodding his head in agreement, so, I think you can go both routes, and that way address the urgency, but also look into the occupancy tax, and in the meantime, we could circle around and do the DPW, analysis too, if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, you could even do a hybrid, pay half of it up front with the
Right.
existing OCTAX and bond
True,
and
too.
EANs for the rest of it.
Dennis?
I think he was falling asleep. It seems to me that, we should get the festival area out of the DPW and have it a standalone entity. And I think the parking lot should be with it. I think between the two, that it's gonna pay itself, and if the DPW's put up money to construct the parking lot, I'm sure that entity could pay them off in some manner, and I think that's the way to go. I think Jeff's got enough to do without doing the park, and once we get it in and get through all this construction, you're gonna be talking about just maintenance and operation.
The one possible problem with that is that the festival space is owned by the county and the village, and the parking lot's just the county, but.
I think we can work that out. I've dealt with the mayor.
Okay, so, do we have a motion to,
Isn't it to move it on to finance, though? I mean, it's not.
Right, if they want to do that.
Right, if you want
issue
to.
serial bonds?
Yeah, my only, thought is that, I mean, here we are, 10 months from a second allocation, right? So bridging the 100 each year out of the OCTAX, I don't believe is a major issue. I mean, I think that it's, simply a question of do we want to do that? And I think these funds were specifically set aside within the legislation specifically for this type of improvement, whether at the fairgrounds or whether it's Wood Park or whatever county assets, for events or eligible activities, came up. So, I would prefer to use the money that we have budgeted and allocated for this purpose, which I think was a good thing that we did, for the specific reason, because these things do come up, and if you're not budgeted, then you're always scrambling around, trying to find, you know, where you're gonna get the money to do this. And I think that if, in that analysis and working with the treasurer and the mayor and Fred, if that, and only if that avenue doesn't work for whatever reason, then advance the other alternative and introduce legislation. I guess would be the way I would put it, that we would do the one before we would even entertain the other.
Would you consider, 3-year serial bonds out of that 100,000?
Well, I think once you went to serial bond, then it would be, I think you would pay it out of the tax, and it would simply be, you know, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever's appropriate. I think we can avoid it in its entirety, with a little bit of thought, a financial thought.
Well, we're under pressure for bidding time, that's the only.
So I would at least offer that as a motion, that we, put together a plan out of the occupancy tax, that,
We could use a reserve too.
yeah, that's what we would do. It would create basically a due from next year, I guess is the way to put it. And that, however, should that, after reviewing the available dollars and the, other requirements of the program, should that not be possible, then we entertain the idea of proposing some serial bond term that, would be repaid in short order, is the way I would put it. In other words, that the sooner better than longer.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
I guess the only concern is that whatever's done, probably should shoot for the February meeting on the 20th to confirm it, because when would the bids be open, do you know, Bill?
I think they're advancing the public, the notice or timeframe is shortened for the fence over normal construction. I would see that you're gonna sign a construction contract probably sometime between your March and your April board meetings. When it's 20 below zero and we get a fresh foot of snow, it's hard to believe we're gonna be digging in the dirt soon, but the goal is to get them out there erecting the fences as soon as they can.
The motion on the floor, Ron, is to use the OCTAX reserves for the fence?
Well, we're using the dollars that were allocated for Wood Park, but in order to meet the requirements, the financial requirements, we're gonna reach into next January a little bit on the county's allocation, which would mean come January, those dollars would have, unless they're increased, would have been expended, is what I'm saying.
Okay, and we're not gonna pursue the bond route at all?
If for whatever reason, legal, financial, meetings with the treasurer, meetings with the mayor, if that idea, if that financial idea is not possible for one reason or another, then and only then we would move on the serial, some type of short borrow.
So we've got $230,000 we can allocate for this fence then?
I believe we do.
We'll have to look.
But I believe we do. I mean, I don't have we don't have the numbers right in front of us right now, but my sense of an order of magnitude is that I think we do.
I think we
would
do.
still recommend that you approve the ability to go to a bond at this point. We don't have to do it. Believe me, I hate to borrow money, so I'm not gonna do it unless we absolutely have to. But in order to ensure everything that I've listened to and talked to ensure that the bids are done and that the guys can get here and actually start putting the fence in the ground this spring, we need to have a guarantee of funding before we can award those bids.
Mr. Chairman, that was the intent of my motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That was the intent of my motion, was then we would.
And I want to assure everybody, I don't think my preparation of a bond resolution for this purpose, for the February 20th meeting, is a heavy lift. I mean, we've done bond resolutions before. It's a bond resolution, there's a form that you follow. It's probably a short environmental assessment form on something like this. So we've done this before. It might be nice to have that available to us in the event that we need it, give us time to explore some of these other opportunities as we go forward. But at least that keeps the process moving forward for the acquisition of the fence.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Okay, thank you.
While you're still here, Fred, referral from Park Operations and Management Committee requesting consideration of a plan to oversee operations of Charles R. Wood Park and establish a budget for the same. We established a budget of $25,000. I'm assuming that the Parks and Operations Management Committee is going to develop the plan.
Right, I think that's the intent. Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion about it, and we had proposals from the village to do the maintenance.
Okay.
So, I think we already have a plan, it's just we need to refine it
Okay.
as
Thank you.
as soon as the festival space is completed.
Mr. Treasurer.
Sorry, I was a little bit late, so I didn't get a chance to distribute these.
You were a little bit late.
Apologize for that. Sometimes the phone rings. Pass those down, please. Good morning, everyone. I'm distributing the typical report that we always used to use in the past, and basically it shows that our collection, we're up 2.13% from the period of 12/31/13 to 12/31/14, all right, which is good news. However, there is more money coming in. We probably won't see it all until the 1st of March, so that figure's going to go up a little bit more, which is also good news. But right now, I guess I've got to ask this committee for some direction, because since we have changed, or we, meaning you, have changed, the board has changed how all of this is done in our accounting practices and everything, this report that I just gave you is kind of obsolete and really doesn't work anymore as far as what you're doing. So I'm asking for a little bit of direction from the committee as to what kind of a report do you want me to give you every month from now on. And, I don't expect a response this minute, but, think about it, and before the next meeting, if I can get together maybe with you, Mr. Chairman, or whoever, and we can come up with a more concise report that's going to better reflect how everything is being done now. Because this kind of doesn't cover it, the format that we've always followed in the past.
Yeah, I'd recommend that, you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Merlino, and myself as Chair of Finance sit down with the Treasurer. I have some thoughts on how I'd like to see the new report.
Yep, absolutely.
We could, I'm sure in short order, we could, being the Chairman of Tax Tourism and Finance, we could,
Yeah. I mean, I just don't want to come up with something. I want your input, because it has to work for this committee. And one other thing, I'm obligated under the occupancy tax law to make the payments to the municipalities on, let me see, I can't remember here what it is. May 30th and October 31st. Now, with the reworking of everything, do we want to look at when those payments are actually made? Is there a more advantageous time for the municipalities to receive that money than the way it's currently done?
We left other than the supplemental in January, as you know, we left the other two payments as is, because I think that, we needed to, see exactly what the financials look like.
Yep.
But I think the sentiment, would be that if we could accelerate, that, earlier, you know, to move that earlier in the year to the village and the towns or whatever, that would be a desirable thing. But we wanted to wait until so perhaps we could combine that with our sitting down on the new budget, and then when we cast that budget, perhaps the 3 chairs, and you could take a look at it, and then, come to some, conclusion.
All right, just be aware that, I'm bound by those 2 dates by the current law.
Right.
All right, so if we wanna change that, we have to amend that law. And I don't have a problem with that. The reason I'm bringing this up is to see what is the best way to do this for the municipalities, because now there's a lot more money going out. You're responsible for paying out a lot more money. When is the best time for you to have it on hand?
John? Yeah, I mean, the more recent allocation that was approved, we're gonna receive this month sometime.
I believe so, yes.
We received that.
Yeah, I think it's already gone.
The towns have already
We
received.
got ours.
All right,
If your
I did,
contract has been signed,
Okay.
your payment is.
all right,
been
they
signed.
didn't,
To hide
You're-
in
you're-
front.
you're-
they didn't, that's good news. Because, you know, we do have some springtime events, especially now that the, burden of having events in the town of Queensbury, Queensbury's being expected to finance those as opposed to the county, the way it was done before. One example is the, boat show that's at the Dome in March. They called me up and wondered where the money was, or going to be, and I said, well, did you file with us? And, no, we filed with the county. And I said, well, now you gotta file with us. And so, now, because we have that check, I can speed this process through, and we have the funding, and now I can allocate it for the boat show. So, but that's the problem. Get back to your original question, Mike, is when is a good time to do this? And I think Ron said the earlier the better. And in cases like this, we do have spring events. And if the towns have the money, they can allocate the money sooner, so.
No, and that's why I'm bringing it up, to see what is best for the municipalities. But like I said, I'm bound by the occupancy tax law, so if we're gonna change it, we have to, it has to be done properly.
Supervisor Stroud brings up a really good point. As most of you know, the village and the town have coordinated their efforts with this tax, and, our hope is to give it out in January. We had our meeting a week or 2 ago, and, it went very well. So we are definitely looking for it early rather than later. Once that obligation is done, then the 2 dates that we have presently for the remainder of the payments are fine.
Okay. All right, well, that's fine. I mean, I just, bringing it up as a thought, because if we're gonna we've changed the basic pretext of this whole thing, do we need to change the rest of it? That's just my question, just looking for some direction.
Okay. Any questions for Mike? Thanks, Mike. We'll have a brief report on the, Warren County Biking Committee.
Thank you. I want to start. My name's Lloyd Mott, if you don't know me. I've been here a few times. We appreciate everything the county has done to help us with our endeavors. And we did appreciate getting the $3,000 grant for this year, 2015. And I appreciated the fact that you understood that our organization doesn't do things within one municipality. For instance, this summer we have 5, June, July, August, September, 4 theme rides. One of them is going to be ride from Queensbury Park up to the parking lot, up to Lake George and go on the classroom on the lake, and then return. And by the way, we're going to use 9L that we were successful in pushing forward that repaving, which we're so glad to see. And that's supposed to be completed for the rest of 9L this year. So then in July, we're going to promote a bike ride the train, and we're going to go to North Creek, ride our bikes down to Thurman area or Stony Creek, and then take the train back, because it's more downhill going down. we're gonna do a ride in Bolton in August, which, we're still working on the routes a little bit. But, that's gonna be fun. We're gonna start in Veterans Park, go a little bit up 11. I've done all of 11 myself once. I really don't wanna do it again. So, we're gonna take a left about a third of the way up, end up going around Trout Lake, go back over. The shorter ride will be round Trout Lake back to Veterans Park. The longer one is gonna be go back across the top of Route 11 and, go due north, and we have two choices, one of two to make, and return to 11 back to Veterans Park. Gonna be a beautiful ride. We're gonna remind everybody for that ride, work a little bit before you come. 'Cause there's a few mountains, there's a few hills in the town of Bolton. That's gonna be fun. Then, our annual I've learned that it's Harry Elke now. We've said Harry Elkes, Harry Elke, I think Harry Elke now, is the famous, biker who was a world record holder in the United States and in this country, or, worldwide, back around 1900. And he is buried in the Glens Falls Cemetery. And we've done some research, thanks to John Strow, really, for the most part. And we had a very, very successful ride starting up in the town of Horicon last year, from, the Hub, the new restaurant, the Hub, which is a restaurant plus bicycling, facility, bike repair shop. And that was tremendously successful. One thing that did help us a great deal was the weather. It was September, something like 26, and it was one of the most beautiful days of the whole year. So we're gonna reserve that kind of weather, and that will be an annual event. So as you can see, as we keep changing the themes and involve the various municipalities, including the city, which we've already done once, we are trying to serve the whole county. So my point is, we appreciate the fact that you see us as a county-wide organization. When we go out and attend the expos, we represent the entire county. And I can tell you that between the New York City Bicycle Tour Expo, you know, the tour plus the expo, we'll be at the Albany Expo in May. We'll be again at the Adirondack Sports Expo in Saratoga in March. That our brochures go like hotcakes. People say, bring us more. And with that, I'll hand out, just pass these around, these are extras for others, I guess. This is our latest brochure done just in the fall, completed after a lot of work, which includes the maps and locations of mountain bike trails in Warren County. This is something the people have been asking. The bike shop people say, Lloyd, look, people come here, they stop, they say, where can we go mountain biking? You know, we've already done our road routes pamphlet. You've all seen that, very well accepted. But this, now we have a very good way to show here are the mountain bike trails or so on that you can ride. So we're very happy with that. This is always something we want to work at to improve, because so much of the areas in the county that are very good for mountain biking, and people already use them sometimes, there's no permission given. And so we're working along those lines to improve permission from landowners or municipalities so that we can double the thickness of this brochure. I'll tell you, it's unbelievable the way people want this, and I'll eat them up. I also have brought to share with you our accomplishments for the year 2014 and a few of the goals for this year. And I'm not going to go over those, you can read those. But we're very pleased with the successes we've made, and some of our goals for the future, which include initiating the thought, which has been thrown around a lot, was actually included in the original Warren County Bicycle Plan that the County Board of Supervisors approved about 6 years ago, is a new trail that would connect the municipal center parking lot to the bikeway. And there are a couple reasons for that. One is parking. One is signage so that people can find our bikeway. There's not great signage for people coming here not knowing where to go for the bikeway. And then thirdly, because the town of Queensbury has done so many things to improve the biking trails down to the Hudson, along the Hudson River, starting with Rush Pond Way Trail, and then the Gurney Lane trails, that this could be a great connector. And as we look at grants, we find that they want connector routes. So this would be something in the future, not this year, maybe probably not next year, but in the near future, I would hope that we can get the plan started and start talking about that, trail from here down to the bike path. I think basically that's it, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Invite you all to get on your bikes and come join us in the summer.
It's not too healthy, you only live to be 25. Okay, we'll get to the, draft agreement with the Adirondack Civic Center Coalition, 'cause I know they've got their attorney that they're paying $20 an hour, so.
Whoa, yeah, $20 an hour?
She got a raise?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Mahoney. I am actually the attorney for the coalition, but I'm also on the board. So, there are a number of board members here this morning. Fred Vogel, Lloyd Mott is actually also on the board, a new addition. Elizabeth Miller, and everyone knows Nick Caimano. We've seen the agreement, excited about the agreement that came in on Friday for the coalition's occupancy tax. We've had a few requested revisions, which I've sent, and I'm not sure who has seen those, and what discussion's been had on those, but I'd be happy to discuss them or take any questions. I can give you a little background on why we proposed some of those revisions, if that would help. I'm not sure, Martin, if...
Yeah, maybe, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
I did get, comments from, Liz. Actually, I've had, in addition to comments from Liz, I had a conversation with, Mr. Caimano over the weekend. I also had a conversation with Mr. Burke over the weekend, and, then received some correspondence from Liz, yesterday. There are a couple of main issues that I think the coalition needs to address with the committee, this morning. The way that I set this up was that, pursuant to your directives and your instructions, but the way that I set this up was that occupancy tax under the agreement, and remember, it's a 3-year agreement, $250,000 a year, paid quarterly, and it renews annually for the next couple of years, provided certain terms and conditions are met. But it was specifically included in the agreement that occupancy tax funds under the agreement would not be used to essentially promote professional hockey, would not be used to promote or used to pay Global Spectrum or for the Adirondack Flames or any other professional hockey team or league, as the case may be. I think you're going to hear today, I know you're going to hear today from Elizabeth and the coalition representatives that they need to discuss that with the committee. I think that's first and foremost, that's the main issue. There were some other issues, one about essentially reporting requirements, not the performance reporting, but the reporting that comes in with the events. What are the events? We know essentially what the events are for the most part. I know they hope to add qualifying events, but the way that this is set up right now in draft is that they would submit information about each event on a quarterly basis. I think understandably that's a bit of a burden for them, and they'd like to change that to every 6 months, and I don't see an issue with that. The other issue that they've addressed is, you know, we like to track where the people are coming from in these types of agreements and collect zip codes and whatnot. They'd like to be, if you're going to approve this, they'd like to be relieved of the burden with respect to collecting that information on hockey events, and that adds personnel costs and et cetera that I'm sure they're concerned about. those were really the three main points. There's a number of minor points, that they brought up, very minor issues that I don't see any problem with at all. But those were the three main points that I identified from Elizabeth's correspondence. And, I'm willing to opine further on all three of those at the appropriate time.
Well, I see, hockey as being an integral part of the Civic Center operation. Without it, it falls apart, so that's my opinion on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's exactly where the coalition is coming from, if I may. And you can see on the list of events, the proposed that we have in the application originally, that's, at this point, the crux of the occupants at the Civic Center. And, there's the hope that, and the promotion and the hard work on the board to get other events to make this go, but the hockey is essential.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it seems to me that, as I think I may have mentioned this to Mr. Caimano in my correspondence with him, in my communications with him, it seems to me that the argument goes that hockey is synonymous with the Civic Center. There's always been hockey there, whether at the professional level, whether at the high school level, whether at the youth level, and when people think of the Civic Center, they think of hockey. Without hockey, the other events don't materialize, I suppose, is the way that the argument goes, and I think that's the point that you're trying to get across.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any problem from a legal perspective saying that it would be a proper use of funds to promote hockey as events at the Civic Center. I think you can't, in many ways, you can't distinguish the two. You can't say we're going to use these funds to promote hockey, to promote the Civic Center, but at the same time not recognize that a critical component of the events is hockey at the Civic Center. So from a legal perspective, I think that's completely defendable. I think really becomes a policy question for the committee. One thought I had was that you might consider, if you want to go in this direction, you might consider attaching and incorporating as an exhibit to this agreement, this funding agreement, exactly how it is that the coalition intends to utilize funds to promote hockey, so that there's no misunderstanding, there's no ambiguity. We know what they're going to do to promote hockey, they know what they're going to do to promote hockey, and there's just no question about how that is going to work. And I think that's something that the coalition clearly should be able to put together between now and February 20th, and put it together that way.
Bill?
Yes, Dennis?
You cleared up my question before I even asked you. I hate it when
He
you
tends to do that.
I'll shut up now.
I just have as long as we're talking about hockey, what effect has changing hockey teams and classifications had on your game plan?
Not much. If anything, it's helped. The team that's in there now, that division of play, could leave after the first year, and as you've all read in the papers, that's what happened. And so the board, now only in its first month of running the show, made great efforts through negotiations to keep or switch hockey teams and make sure that there's a hockey team there for next season. And so the ECHL is coming in. That's a great thing for the coalition, for the Civic Center, for the community. It doesn't change our game plan. It ensures that we have hockey next season. We'll attach to our exhibit, obviously, those event dates, but it's a help. It was great.
Are they playing the same number of games, same kind of schedule?
I'm not sure that I don't.
6 fewer.
6 fewer. Okay. 6 fewer games.
Okay.
And that's exactly why we looked at this situation with, is it proper to advertise hockey? We have a whole, we're not looking at printing tickets or anything like that, but we have a whole new genre coming in. And it's important that we let the public know how good this is going to be. And that's really the genesis of the whole thing.
I don't I don't have any problem with you promoting hockey at any level. I was just I'm worried about your game plan more than, excuse the pun.
I'm playing goalie now.
That was my fear.
And on that point, that's kind of where we were coming from with some of our requested changes. The coalition now is a group of, 15 community members who, are doing this in addition to, the businesses they run, et cetera. And so feasibly, at this stage in the game, with only a month in, for example, the 6-month reporting requirement, feasibly, to get that document for you, no problem. It just gives them a little more time. The idea about the exhibit is a good one, and something that whatever information is requested, the coalition is glad to provide. It's just at this stage, the number of people involved to do those things is limited until we have our game plan. And the zip code thing we already discussed, so I don't know if there's any questions on that. Be happy to collect information, show you what we're doing with the money, show you where it's going, who's benefiting. Those are all good things and necessary information for you. Just practically, we want to make sure we'll be able to do the things we're committing to.
Ron?
I don't have any problem with promoting any activity at the Civic Center. I mean, that's what this is all about, I think. But maybe you could just take a moment to explain specifically relative to hockey, how your corporation benefits from that advertising, how you benefit from that advertising in terms of your revenue arrangements. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, I assume you're advertising to get more people there, and more people helps you in what part of your business plan?
Attendance-wise, for
Yes.
example, I mean, the more people that come to the hockey games, the more people that are eating and drinking there, they're enjoying the hockey, they'll remember to come back for other events. It's all being mindful that this is a charitable, not-for-profit corporation that's running this. So the coalition is not looking to make any money or have any benefit to its members. It's simply to put it back into the Civic Center. And so any kind of attendance, any kind of promotion for these events is just to make it be able to continue for hockey or anything else.
So there's just a follow-up. So the corporation has a benefit in terms of maybe a better question would be if you could discuss your revenue streams, and then it would become obvious how the promotion on hockey benefits the sustainability of the corporation and the sustainability of the business plan.
I'll be very frank, we don't have numbers at this time. I don't think the coalition even has those numbers at this stage. We took over January 1, and we're working with the city and the existing players at the Civic Center itself that have these books and records to get that information specifically. We don't have a strategic plan in place as of this date, but that's all in the works as well. So I'm not sure I can answer, any of us can answer today what our revenue stream is. I'd be happy to provide what financials we do know and submit that, absolutely. And if you're looking to see numbers of attendance at hockey games, for example, we can get that for you. But specific numbers, I don't have. I'm not sure we have that yet.
Are you talking about what they hope to do?
Yeah, what I'm wondering is what your, for example, you have all or part of whatever refreshments are sold, whatever food is sold. You have a piece of the gate. You have as it relates to hockey, you have a piece of whatever that activity generates in terms of revenue, which is going to end up paying your bills going forward.
Sure.
And so my question is simply, if you're advertising to get more people into the facility, what specific revenue streams is that influencing that the corporation relies on in terms of your sustainability? I don't need specific numbers today, but just generally speaking. otherwise, you know, that, the benefit would be a more indirect benefit in terms of more people at the Civic Center results, I guess, indirectly at some point, more people in the restaurants or more people whatever. But that's not helping you pay your lighting bill, that's not helping you pay your heating bill or your personnel bill. You follow what I'm saying?
I do, but
think this is an important discussion.
yeah, I do, but
That needs to take place over the next few months, because I think a lot of people are not knowing of these things, and I think there's enough, my point of people, and explain to people, what's happening or going to happen.
Sure.
And how, the Civic Center is going to go from, achieve some level of economic sustainability.
Sure. And I think at this stage in the game, where clearly it's known that the hockey games that are in there now are not enough to keep it going. I mean, that's why we're where we are. The coalition got involved. That's why this contract and these monies from the occupancy tax is so critical at this stage in the game, because the people in the seats for hockey games isn't enough. And we know that. We need it. And so the money from this agreement will be used to promote new events, to make up that difference that the hockey games and the events that are scheduled now aren't fulfilling. We need more events there. I think that's the plan for that's clearly the plan for the money now in the application that was submitted. It's to offset some of these costs. And besides events at the Civic Center and grants that we're applying for and monies such as this, other than those things at this moment, I'm not sure there's any other things in the fire along that line.
Well, I think suffice to say this, Ron, right now, as we speak, there are a number of people working diligently to do the two things that any business requires: increase the income and decrease the expenses. That is high on our mind. We have several people who do that for a living, and we're working on that right now, and that's exactly what Liz is saying. We'll give you those numbers shortly. Let me just say that with the new ECHL, it is our hope that the income which we have generated so far through the fandoms will go up, because we think we have a plan that will do that. On the other side of the coin, we're also working very hard, including through that contract with the ECHL, to reduce the other side, so that we can have for you in the cities a balanced budget, if you will, and maybe even make a buck. That's what we're working on very hard, and we're working on it with people like Elizabeth, people like Fred, who are diligent workers of their own in their own businesses, who are putting together these numbers.
Jim?
Maybe I can,
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'll help a little bit. The naming rights, when we looked at it, we were gonna do naming rights for, if I remember correctly, 140,000, and I think you're looking maybe 100,000 or something like that. And then whatever it is, the fact is, the more people that you have going through the building, the more you can leverage that to get higher for your naming rights. And if it's $100,000 for your naming rights, that's a significant amount that will reduce your deficit. The same thing with advertising around the ice rink. All that is significant revenue, and the more people that you have coming in, the more you can ask advertisers for that money. So it all is, the thing that I saw the figures before we had hockey, because we went a year or two without it, and then when they showed us what the hockey would do, when they showed us the numbers, in, I think it was 2008, the numbers just went right, it was like, like resuscitating a patient, it just went right up. So hockey, because it generates numbers in terms of attendance, as well as ad revenues and the obvious things, drinks, food, and all that, really, it really is a huge boost, and it's from that everything else comes. If you have, I don't know how many people go through hockey, but if you can take that as your base and then add on to it with other events, that gives you your naming rights, and it just adds to the revenue you can get from it.
That's great. Yeah,
Okay.
those are good points. Thank you.
Dennis?
I'm glad you, spoke up, Jim. You had me worried here for a minute. I am a little nervous, though. You still haven't really answered the question. I mean, when you have a hockey game, are you getting some of the revenues from the soft drink sales and the hot dogs and hamburgers?
Sure, yes, we are, yep.
Do you expect to get more with this other one? Let me ask you a key burning question here. How about Global Spectrum? Are they still in the game?
We had actually, we had a meeting with the Vice President of Global Spectrum last week, and we're negotiating that ongoing.
Renegotiating.
We're negotiating.
Okay. Good luck.
John?
I mean,
I think it's positive.
the only,
I do too. It can't be any worse.
and to be honest, it comes down to who or what entity can we use to sustain our ability to continue. I mean, if it's numbers, as you're asking, and if they can't do it, then we find someone that can. If they can, we can, but it comes down to numbers, and cutting costs is the main goal here, and increasing revenue, making it sustainable.
I think I wasn't so interested in the numbers right now, as I was in trying to get some kind of feel of how you are running this
The answer is yes to that
business.
question. The answer is yes. We are, they are, the committee, the
Well,
subcommittee.
we have 4 different committees that we're presently working with. We have a PR and marketing, we have a fundraising, we have facilities, and we have the 4th one that I.
Finance.
Finance, thank you. A lot of heavy hitters on each one of these committees, and the committees are really moving quickly. And you gotta remember, there's a lot of, community-minded business people that are taking away from their businesses the time to be on these committees, to get this thing up and running. We're not gonna let it fail. We're going to make it either be in the black or make money to sustain this thing to a higher level. That's why we put so much time and effort into the fundraising, into writing the grants with Ed, and I am very confident that this thing is gonna move forward. I don't think the business people would be involved in it at this level if we weren't really concerned and positive that we can make this and go of this.
Specifically on Global Spectrum, that will come out positive. I'm convinced of that. I can't say anything right now. I'm not even on the committee. The executive council, the executive committee of the organization is working with that. That will be positive. I guarantee it.
We're also looking at different, similar venues in New York State that have had positive impact in this type of venue. A similar one downstate that we're working very closely with to see what they did correctly, that we can mirror what they did.
Well, that's great. I appreciate you.
Something that you said before, Ron, I just want to follow through on, not just with what we're doing to make a dollar and cents here, but what we do what we can do for the community if we do this right. The night that the people came in from the UCHL, they came in the night before the press conference. There was a hockey game, and they took them to dinner, and they couldn't get a seat. There was no seats available for them to have dinner because the hockey game was on, and the restaurants were filled downtown. That's a very positive thing for everyone, I think.
The new team, the ECHL Adirondack Flames, that's owned by Calgary still?
It's a Calgary is the parent, if
Under-
you will.
yeah.
Yes, under the umbrella.
Some arrangement
Right,
underneath.
yes.
Do they have any obligation coming in to advertise themselves and promote themselves? Did they have any obligation to do that already?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are assisting, working with, doing those same sorts of things, but not to the degree perhaps that we would like to see it. We want to make sure that it's out there. He certainly came in, the commissioner came in and did the press conference last week, so that was a good thing, a promotional tool, but they are working with the Civic Center and the Civic Center Coalition to promote their new ECHL team and let us know what they're all about and who the players are.
The reason why I ask is, well, at least part of this afternoon's discussion is whether this occupancy tax funding should be used for promotion of this hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they're promoting themselves quite well then.
On their own?
Yeah.
You know, I think it'll be similar to what the ACHL team has done in the past, and, we weren't involved in that, so, are they bound to promote themselves? I'm not entirely sure. They want to because it benefits them. They want the attendance. They want us to get the attendance because that's what we pushed for in getting them here. So there's definitely some promotion on their part, absolutely, but we are ultimately the ones that want to ensure that that takes place, for that event and the other hockey events and other sporting events that come. So, I'm not sure if that
Well,
answered.
I'm just, if you take the initiative to promote the hockey team, are they gonna take the back seat then?
No.
No, they have worked closely with us, and I don't think that would benefit them. You know, we both need to.
I don't think so either, but I
Yeah.
mean, if you were doing a good enough job promoting the team,
Mhm.
then the team might say, okay, well, they're doing a good enough job, we can save some money there.
They have certain things, I believe, under the contract, and I'm not sure I've seen it entirely, that they're required to do for promotion. So they have some requirements there, but, no, I don't see that happening. I see us both working together and them promoting and us promoting as well.
Yes.
Frank Dietrich, just background, I've been around hockey a long time. My son played through college. I was president of an association in Pittsburgh. Our ice bill was $2 million a year. So, and I follow hockey. A couple things for the county to think about here, and I'm sure from the coalition you're already thinking about this. In the AHL, there's only one team whose attendance is up year over year. It's the Rochester Americans, and they're coming from the cellar. So they couldn't go lower. I think their average attendance was 2,600 or something. So if you look at the trend in hockey attendance, AHL's at a higher tier than ECHL, and the trend in AHL's down. Now, granted, it strikes me that they're a huge tenant to the property. You need that anchor tenant to make things go. The concern that I have is we are taking tax dollars at the end of the day here and funneling it to support this effort. A keen eye on the strength of the core, to me, is really important for that facility to run. And the ECHL is in fact a step down. The hockey, for what it's worth, is a little different. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I've been a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania resident. So we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Washington Nailers are 40 minutes away. That's the ECHL team there. The Wilkes-Barre-Scranton Penguins is the AHL team. Their attendance has fallen like crazy. The Nailers are stable. It's a rink that maybe sits 3,000. And in today's climate, with an AHL team here, the Civic Center is about 75% occupancy, I think. 4,800 seats, 3,600 is the average attendance or thereabouts, if I remember the numbers right. So again, it's not a complaint against against the activities and the like, but I do worry about it from the county perspective. We're trying to take care of an element of this community that's been here since 1979. And we've moved $250,000 a year for the next 3 years to it from the occupancy tax pool, that in order to make it sustainable, that, you know, the development and I think because there's community dollars, there's tax dollars involved here, transparency on how this business case is coming together is especially important, right?
Mhm.
And hooking, I do, for what it's worth, it worries me to see the anchor tenant being hockey, in particular where it's going actually downstream in terms of the caliber of player. This is the equivalent of AHL's AAA baseball.
Mhm.
We went to AA here, to use a baseball analogy.
Can
Therefore,
I
go
say
ahead.
something? I think you gotta remember too, that the team we had last year, what was it, Front? Was it the Front, right? That their attendance was so low, and this year, we're averaging between 3,800 and 4,200. So with, you know, they were both AHL players, but this team, I think these were, for whatever reason, this group has sparked a lot more enthusiasm than previous AHL teams, and I think because it's the same mothership, so to speak, I have, we're very hopeful that the ECHL will be just as sustainable.
And to answer your question a little bit, and to John Strauss too, that's exactly why we want to have the ability to pile on top of whatever the ECHL does. We want to remind people of what's here. We want to remind them that you're helping pay. We want to remind them that it's a coalition of independent business people that are trying to put this together for the economy of not only downtown Warren County, but for all of Warren County. That's why we want to be able to do the extra advertising and promotion, regardless of what ECHL does, because there's a lot of things that can be done.
And if you look at the Albany team, at the TU, there are what, 2,300 people in the season? That, what happens to that team down the road? I think you'll see more hockey fans coming in.
Yeah, I think first of all, let me say I'm so pleased to see so many of the corporation's members here, and I would hope that as the months go on, that it continues. This is a tremendous opportunity for the new corporation to talk about successes and challenges, and to discuss your thoughts as to how your business plan is going, how it's developing. We're covered by the media, we're on TV, and because I think there are a lot of people in the community at large that really, are keen on you being successful. And I think part of that is going to be to really focus on, this matter. And that was the aim of my initial question. It's aimed at, transparency, sustainability, and communication, being able to communicate where we are, where we'd like to go, why we'd like to go there. I think the business community is interested in hearing that, in the public at large. So, and I know I am.
As of coming out party, there will be a push here on plans.
And one other point to that, since starting here, the coalition has been going a million miles an hour. It's been fast and furious. We're a month in. We've had a few months of getting the corporation forms, the tax exemption applications submitted. I mean, there's contracts, there's thousands of things going at once. And so the coalition, along your point, is absolutely excited to share everything with the community. And we just want to make sure that all the ducks in a row, that we have the plans in place so that we can answer these questions. There's plans to reach out to the community and have some symposiums about, what is going on and what the community would like to see. So, absolutely, and this is one great place to do that as well. And as we continue and formalize those plans, we can share them.
Gene?
I'm definitely supportive of this thing, and I'm gonna be the little bit on the negative side. I've sat here for more than 10 years, and in the last 5 years, this county has helped the Civic Center with over $500,000 on the floor and seats and these things. But what if, by the time this year, next year, at this time comes, and it's not working out? You still can't, you're losing money, you can't even break even. Do you have a contingency plan for that? Or will, I just hate to see put another $250,000 this year, $250,000 next year, and $250,000 the year after that, and then all of a sudden it comes and they say to us, we can't make it. I worry about that.
Sure, and that is a worry. And we have a 5-year lease in place, so for 5 years we're running the Civic Center. And there's not an option to get out if we can't do it. So we put our feet to the fire there and said, listen, we're gonna work at this for 5 years and see if we can make a go of it. Keep it here for everyone. The the initial, how it started was the outreach to the community and these people that got together and said, we need this to get this going. So we have that. We have a lot of, ideas formulating now to make sure that that happens. Grant applications, see what we can get from that. And then we have our whole promotional side, PR, marketing, to get events in and there. So there's a lot of different parts to that, and ideas and things that we have in place. What if we get to 5 years and we can't make a go of it? I don't know the answer to that. We hope that's not the case.
Well,
Well, I mean, you guys are running a business, and that's,
Right.
you know, it's location, it's the way you handle it, it's, you know, and you are taking a chance.
Gene, you are taking, you guys pass a budget, and it is highly dependent upon the weather. Because we have so much tourism here, and if the weather turns sour both summer and winter, all of a sudden that budget you guys put together, I was there once, it can't sustain itself. You have to do something. You don't plan that way. You're planning on success, and that's what we're doing. And that's why it's, as Elizabeth pointed out, it is a godsend, really, that people like Tom Murphy and Elizabeth Miller have come, and Fred Vogel, who are successful in their own rights, have come out to say, look, we think we could run this better as businessmen who face those realities all the time, as opposed to the city, which found itself in some financial trouble and couldn't do some of the things that we are looking forward to do.
We're gonna be the #1 promoter of events in this area. And there might only be a little over 4,000 seats in that arena. And when you talk to organizations like Live Nation and these people that are bringing large events in, well, Civic Center might work today, but if we need to bring 10,000 people in, well, maybe it's the airport, maybe it's West Mountain, maybe it's up in Lake George. This is going to be an effort that's gonna try to draw for everybody, even though it's only a small spot in the very one place.
Rachel?
If I could just switch places with you. Sure. I have just a couple questions on the flow going to the podium, so I apologize.
Are we broken?
No, fortunately, great news today, so I'm off the aircast. But, and I tried to kind of write this out so that I could, accurately state some of my concerns, but I just wanted to start off by saying that I agree with my colleagues. I think that the Civic Center is a regional asset, but it's also a really hot topic in Queensbury, and I'd go as far to say probably in all of our communities. And that's understandable, because we're asked to spend a whole lot of money, taxpayer money and OCTAX money, in this endeavor. So, just to kind of follow up on both what Supervisor Conover said, that educating and informing our community regarding this contract is important, and that transparency is also important. And I'm glad, Nick, to hear you say that the goal is a balanced budget and to make a buck, right? That's awesome. But at the same time, I believe it's worth the energy and the time we're spending here today and in the future to clarify some of the concerns that I've heard. And if you would just bear with me and let me kind of hammer out these questions, and I've tried to eliminate the ones that you guys have already addressed. So to understand in terms of your reporting, and from reading the contract, and I read the one that was posted online, so I don't know if that's the revised contract or not.
There are, if I may, with respect to reporting requirements, I have not made any changes.
Okay.
So they're requesting a change with respect to the quarterly to the 6-month, not for the performance reporting, but the quarterly to the 6-month for the events, explanation of the events, the data about the events that will be forthcoming at the Civic Center.
But not specifically about how the money will be spent regarding those events?
Right, I think what they're saying is that, how the money is going to be spent is, they're in a position where it's better for them to do that every 6 months. With respect, I think this is what they're saying, with respect to what they've done in each quarter, I think they're still willing to submit their performance, their quarterly performance reports, as I understand it.
I thought they were both 6 months.
They are, but your email indicated
they'll break it.
only with paragraph 2, which is the event event, information.
I'll look at that, and I don't, I'm not sure if we're gonna answer questions as you go, but
But Rachel, to answer your question, I haven't made changes I made some minor changes to a draft that I have, but with respect to the contract that's online and those requirements, I haven't made any changes.
So, that being said, my concern is that, if I'm understanding all this correctly, we're, at 10 days after the signing of this agreement, you would receive, the first payment. And that ahead of time, we're not getting really the breakdown of how exactly that money's being spent, but by this proposal, whether it be quarterly or every 6 months, then we're getting, in essence, an after-action report, for lack of a better word, I would assume?
I do think, though, with that first payment, I mean, they need to have something to us with respect to what they intend to utilize those funds for, and I think that's your intention, is to get that to us.
Okay.
And then I mean, we're a little bit behind the first quarter, obviously, and then it's quarterly, thereafter. But I didn't set this up to just kind of give them an ability to. Yeah. Yeah. County shall pay the sum of $250,000 to the coalition to offset or reimburse expenses for the events. Such sum shall be proportionally paid in advance on a quarterly basis, with the 2015 first quarterly payment paid 10 days after execution of this agreement, and all subsequent payments made on the 15th day of the first month of each quarter thereafter, and the exact sum payable to be determined by the total amount that the coalition has calculated that needs to be raised to fund the marketing and promotion for each event in the succeeding quarter that is currently not available or expected to be available as specified in 2G. So that's the point that I'm trying to get across.
So my specific question is, are we gonna know what's being spent prior to that?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
All right.
You're not,
Go ahead.
you're correct, Supervisor Seaver, they are not receiving $250,000 lump sum upfront.
Okay.
They're receiving a quarterly, other than the first payment, which they received so many days prior or after we execute this agreement. And then, as the other quarters unfold, and as these meetings are held and other reports and information is exchanged, we'll be receiving information relative to the year as it unfolds. And so that.
So if there's changes from what you expect to spend it on and what you actually spend it on,
Well,
that would.
I guess I just want to amplify that, Supervisor, if I can. The way that I set this up, and it's about the events. What do they need to provide for the events to get our payments, right? Paragraph 2, arrangements for events. Beginning upon execution of this agreement, and thereafter in each quarter of 2015, and in each quarter of any additional year under this agreement, the coalition shall provide in writing the following information about each event that will occur in the upcoming quarter for which the coalition intends to use county funding to offset expenses under this agreement. Then it's A through I is the information that they have to provide. It's quite expansive.
Right, I saw that.
So upon execution of this agreement, the coalition needs to be prepared to deliver to you what it is for those expenses that they intend to use that quarterly payment for the next quarter.
Okay, and what I'm getting at is the follow-up from that. So I would expect that after-action report, or whatever it might be, will also be provided.
Correct.
Okay. And, okay, so that answers that question. And then, specifically, I guess, you know, as it relates to advertising hockey, I guess I'm concerned when I hear, people say, listen, without hockey this falls apart, or that your biggest draw is hockey, because initially we heard that $250,000 a year, at that time advertising hockey wasn't on the table, right? It was specifically under the spending guidelines. So what specifically, what's going to get diverted from other projects, or in order to then advertise for hockey? I mean, using our tax money to do that, I guess I'm wondering, when I look at this contract, if I'm understanding it all correctly, what you're saying is that you wanna be relieved of the reporting obligation as it relates to the hockey attendance, but, and maybe I misunderstood, but that 1,000 rooms in 2013 is what you estimate were generated from the Civic Center. So, if we're going to approve advertising hockey, how are we going to know how many heads and beds really came out of those hockey dollars that were expended, or that hockey,
Our thoughts on that was the hockey games, to have people stand at every entrance for hockey games, and take zip codes and whether they're staying at hotels, while possible to do, will probably not get the information that you need. And, I think that the effort for that will not be beneficial. And so if there's other ways we can do that, I mean, we were thinking when we saw that of course we wanna get you these zip codes. Of course we wanna see how many people stay in the hotels and eat in the restaurants, but if there's another way to feasibly do that, that would make more sense and get more accurate information, we wanna do that. Maybe it's through the ticket sales. I don't know the answer at this moment, but, for hockey events especially, which are more frequent than other events, standing at a Disney on Ice, for example, A, you're gonna probably get a lot of the same people. B, there are so many more games that it's probably feasibly not gonna give you what you're looking for. So, that was our thought process on that. We certainly wanted to collect that information. I think it's important for us to see who's coming and who we want to reach out to promote other events, and for you to see what is coming from it. So that was our thinking on exempting hockey games from zip code questionnaires.
Well, I guess just at first glance, and really not, obviously as I'm learning more of this, from you guys, I guess, my concern would be regarding that advertisement of hockey, only because you've got a team that could also really upfront, contribute so much of that money. But out of those 1,000 rooms, I guess I'd wanna know from 2013, how many were from the hockey games? And it sounds like maybe that information isn't available. But when I look at this, I'm also wondering then, when you wrote on section, regarding the number of rooms on the contract, I believe you put NA, that there was, Schedule B, specifically number 13, you have a series of questions marked as non-applicable, but in the future, I guess that's what I'm wondering, are you gonna be able to re-ask any other OCTAX recipient to answer these questions, correctly?
That's correct, that's the application. I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think we have to look at this in a little different light than, say, Americade. This isn't Americade. This is a different entity, this is a different function. There are multiple events, and I think it goes back to the discussion that we had early on, is I understand the coalition's position, is that having this exit information for hockey games is understandably burdensome, given the number of events that are there, A. B, not sure that the information that is going to be generated from that is gonna be all that helpful. But I think C is really the more important factor, and it's that you get back to this, in the words of our chairman, integral component of hockey with the Civic Center. I think it's the change in landscape that they find themselves in, with hockey changing at the Civic Center from AHL to ECHL, together with the synonymous aspect of hockey in the Civic Center going hand in glove, if you will. I think those factors kind of combined, and what they're trying to suggest to us is that they need to use OCTAX funding to further that integral component of the Civic Center, and that in some ways ensures that these other events, which do bring in demonstrated heads and beds, from what I understand, will remain viable and available for the Civic Center. Am I explaining that correctly?
So then we will continue to see the reporting requirement outside of the hockey for the heads and beds piece of it, or no?
Yes, that's the way, that's my intention.
In that contract,
Yes, we said yes.
Okay.
that was fine, that we would do that.
Okay, and you know, I'm only asking the questions because I think we have a lot of worthy applicants for OCTAX, and you know, there's been a lot of discussion around this, so I guess I just wanna make sure I can clearly convey it to, when I'm asked those questions and understand really the meat and potatoes of it. And so, lastly, I've always advocated for some type of a Warren County discount. You've got your taxpayers funding a good portion of this. Is that something that's been discussed in the group?
A discount for tickets that
Warren County residents?
ticket sales? I don't know that we've had that discussion.
There's been,
Certainly, we can. I mean,
I know Nick and I have
sure
talked about it, but I
there's
didn't know.
been discussions about that, and when there will be discussions about that, we usually find a way to do it.
I remember those cards, those credit cards where different entities, you could get a discount or percentage, and those are great ideas, and that's certainly something we can talk about.
Okay, and lastly, all I wanna bring up is that in this contract, you state that you haven't received any funding from the county. And I understand previous years, and I understand you're a new group, but we have given, as Supervisor Morlino brought up, over $500,000 to the Civic Center. And I know Mike Swan sent out a chart, I don't have it available, and I believe it came from you, that just kind of broke down the money that's gone to the Civic Center, the money that's gone to the city of Glens Falls. And I just think it's worth stating that in this contract, what's on our website clearly appears like there hasn't been a contribution from the county, when in fact, there's been hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I don't know why that appears that way.
Well, here, let's
Well,
wait.
you're referring to your application, correct?
I'm referring to your application.
I mean, you haven't received any, under the application, you haven't received any funds. So it's accurate to say that the coalition hasn't received any funds from the county. It's also accurate to say that the county has provided funds for the Civic Center. So I don't know if that clarifies it.
Okay.
But to the extent that they're representing in their application that they haven't received any funding, that's accurate.
That they haven't received any OCTAX funding.
Correct.
That's what that specifically to. Okay, I just that jumped out at me a little bit when I was reading that, knowing the contribution that has been there previously to the Civic Center. But I appreciate you listening to my questions. I'm sure I'll have more, and I just wanted to make sure going forward I understood that. And it was an important meeting that I wanted to make sure I was at, even though I'm not a member of that committee. So, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanna say, I think, Rachel makes Supervisor Sieber makes a very good point in that, we also survey, our hoteliers annually, at least annually, and we have other survey things that we do here, and that we might want to give some thought to what we survey and how we survey it, as it relates to the Civic Center, because I think, Supervisor Sieber's correct. We may need to modify our information gathering as well, not only for our own decision making, but it might be useful to the corporation as well. For example, we survey our hoteliers and as to giving us a hierarchy, if you will, of the different activities that we participate in assisting. And now that's one type of tool. It may not specifically lend itself to Civic Center, but that does not mean that we couldn't also survey them relative to the Civic Center. Particularly, it seems to me, in the out of summer, off-season time when you're conducting your programs and putting people in a lot of our businesses, not only our hotels and motels, but in our restaurants as well. I would think that Lake George in particular, that would be important information to try to garner.
Forward when we do something for other events there, to have your zip code connected somehow to tickets when people look at it for the future.
But that's something I think is, since we're financing partners now, that we can give some thought to and
Yes.
I have trouble holding the thought that long. So fortunately, I wrote some notes. I'm a little concerned about I think you admitted that the games are crucial to your, whole business scenario down there. I think the information from the games is crucial to me, and I don't see it as being that difficult to garner basic information. I'm not crazy about zip codes, but zip codes are relatively easy to get, and whether or not they're staying overnight and whether they ate at a local restaurant, including restaurants in Saratoga. I think those are 3 tidbits of information that there should be some way you could get them. I've been involved in a project in Lake George, and it's been suggested several times that we do surveys to generate some key information, and they usually come with a caveat that you should seek some, you as in me, some professional advice, which is probably true. I think even with your Warren County residence thing, as Ms. Seaver brought up, if you have 3,800 people at your game and 3,600 of them check off a resident of Warren County, it pretty much tells you who's coming, which will pretty much eliminate the heads and beds thing, but now you still have the restaurant thing. And to me, I know that heads and beds is the acid test for the true Octax people, and there aren't many of them around, but there are some. The restaurants is important to me, and I know the restaurants are full. I've been to the games. I've stopped in Glens Falls on game nights to try to get a meal someplace and seen the crowds. It's there. It'd be interesting to see that information. And then the last thing, on a totally unrelated to the Civic Center, is I'm glad to see Rachel up there with her laptop during the meeting, doing a great job on her presentation because she had her laptop. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Fred?
I'll be brief. I just want to quote one sentence out of the Warren County Economic Development Corporation report of 2010 Warren County Tourism White Paper, and it reads as follows in a footnote. Another interesting statistic is that the per capita sales tax receipt in Warren County are almost twice what they are statewide, indicating the importance of visitor spending in Warren County. It also indicates how important the tourism industry is in Warren County, whether it be heads or beds or the peripheral spending at the restaurants where you can't get a seat.
Well, certainly heads and beds is a component of occupancy tax, equally important as economic impact. So, the Civic Center has an unequal economic impact over the course of a year versus any one event. So, we've gotten a little bit off track here, but.
Yeah, well,
What's new?
Get back on the contract.
would Martin go through those 3 things that you're suggesting
That's
after?
what I was gonna, first business order of business is Exhibit A, which allows them to, promote hockey.
Right, the, item 1, in the contract under events, particularly states as follows, that, it says what qualifying events are, those events listed in Schedule B. That's, Schedule B is actually their application, for funding, and it includes a long list of events and similar events that are reasonably expected to create hotel occupancy monies or otherwise promote tourist activities locally, but shall not include Global Spectrum or any other entity to promote the Adirondack Flames games or sporting events, the American Hockey League, or any other professional hockey league or team. And I think what the discussion is that there's a request to modify that so that they can use occupancy tax to promote hockey at the Civic Center as a general addition to economic growth here. But my thought, Mr. Chairman, again, was to have the coalition prepare some type of attachment to the agreement that would say exactly how they intend to do that, whether they intend to use that for global spectrum or not, maybe we should debate here a little bit, but how they intend to promote hockey at the Civic Center so that there's no misunderstanding as we go forward. So I think we take these one at a time.
So do you need a resolution to support that?
I think maybe we just have do we wanna do all three?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is, if I understand, Ms. Mahoney correctly, is that what they'd like to do with respect to, if I understand her correctly, you don't have a problem with providing under Section 2, under arrangements for events, that all that information for your first payment, right? But you'd like that to be, you'd like further information to be required only on a 6-month basis? Does that also pertain to your performance reporting, in your quarterly performance reporting as required in, 4?
I think that was the intent.
Okay.
If we're gonna do one reporting 6
Okay.
months, let's do them all 6 months.
Okay, all right, so that's been made clear. So what they're asking for, what they're saying, but you still want your payments quarterly? Okay, so what you would do is that you would essentially, you would have to give us the information for that entire 6-month period.
Could we do that, trimester rather than 6 months? Let them go to 4 months instead of quarterly, at least the first year? I'm not...
Certainly fine by me, I think feedback from the coalition.
Again, there's no issue here from us. I wanna be clear that transparency and any information that's required is given completely, and if there's something we miss, we supplement. The only thought process was, how much can we do in these short windows? So we suggested 6 months, trimester. I mean, I'm not sure that would help us be able to collect that information, but it would be a concession on your part, I know. We've just got few people to do it, and they're big jobs.
How about this? How about, since this is their initial year, we go over their request for the 6 months, and at the end of the year, we revisit this and see if we want it more often.
I think that's fine. I think there has to be an understanding, though, that there's going to be some of these events, when they do their initial reporting for the 6 months, there's gonna be some of these events that they don't have information about. And I think we have to understand that if that's the case, if they say further information coming, that they represent that they're committed to supplementing these reports during that 6-month period.
Okay.
And okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just a question on, because I read the contract too, and just wanted to make sure, because I'll probably end up having to follow up on this as well. The quarterly filings in advance, which I understand we want to change to 6 months, but the quarterly filings also dictated what would be provided in terms of funds under the contract. So, in other words, as I read it, as if I understood it correctly, they get their first payment of 1/4 of the $250,000, but then in the second quarter under the contract, the way it's now written, they have to provide documentation from the previous quarter, plus they have to provide documentation for the going ahead quarter, and for instance, if the next payment doesn't warrant a quarter of that, which is what, roughly 62,000, then they would only get 52,000. But if you move to a 6-month, then we're just gonna blindly give them that second quarter payment of 62,000, and then wait till 6 months to check to see if all that money's been spent, and then, you know what I'm saying? I guess I just wanna make sure I understand that.
Well, I thought the way that was handled, if they still want their quarterly payments, I think they have to make their, so, for example, with the first submittal that you're gonna make in order to get that first quarterly payment, okay? You're gonna have to go 6 months out, right, on what you wanna do, events for 6 months out. You may not have all of that information, but you have a pretty good idea what's coming. And I think the idea is that they're going to have to supplement that information. This agreement requires them to appear here at every monthly meeting and give status reports. You're still willing to do that, correct? So you'll have that supplemental information as you go along here. I think it's gonna be a kind of learn as we go. But it is, I might recommend that we leave it at quarterly at this point, if that's going to, if that's okay with us, if that's okay with us, it's okay with you, because you're going to get that information about the events supplemented, hopefully each month as you come forward, correct? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, so, I mean, that was my thought, is that that's how it would work. Let them say, we're gonna have these events for the next 6 months. They have the expectation about the payments. Those payments are to be applied to those, presumably applied to those events during that 6-month period. And in order for you're not gonna make that second quarterly payment if you don't have all the information that they're required to provide for that 6-month period. That's how I saw this going.
I'm comfortable with the, delivery of some hard copy, I guess is the way to put it, final report every 6 months, but I think the spirit of this, or the idea of this, is that, at least monthly, there will be a fairly in-depth report here at these meetings of what went on during that period and what your experience has been during that period, so that, good and bad, and that, so that we can, and that the community at large can follow this story and this success story, hopefully. So my only concern would be that the some sort of 6-month final report not be confused with the need, the desire to want to have continual, regular reporting on what's going on at the Civic Center. Now, if you're compiling it in an audit sense, in committing it to hard copy and putting it in a report kind of thing, that's fine. You're basically gonna summarize what's happening here for every month or more, and you're gonna be communicating with this board. And I just want to make sure that we're in agreement on that, which is, I think, the theme and the essence of, hopefully, the essence of this section. So then the question would be, is therefore that's the understanding, do we have a modification of this? I'm not sure we do.
I think it may need a little clarifying.
A little tweaking?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Mike, I think just maybe to clarify my earlier remarks, if I understand this correctly, assuming they provide the anticipated information, that's gonna be the easy part, I guess, because then the county will issue $62,000. That's the first quarter, that's the first payment. There's a second quarter before we get to the 6 months. That second quarter payment, if they're not providing details for a 6-month period, there is no way for us to determine whether they've spent or not spent the money for that second quarter, so we're just gonna go ahead and give them another $62,000. In other words, under the 6-month scenario, I just wanna make sure everybody understands, I mean, if the county is trying to follow and enforce this agreement, I don't see how we do that until we've shelled out 62 plus 62 is, 125,000. And then at that point, we should have the information in place. And if I'm understanding what we're trying to do here, is then we're gonna look and say, okay, has the Civic Center spent that 125,000? And then they'll be giving us projections for the next 6 months as to what their expenditures are gonna be. If they haven't spent in the first 6 months that 125,000, then their payments will be lowered the next 6 months. Am I correct?
You have the gun.
Rachel?
I guess my question is, it's not just have they spent it, has it been spent appropriately and according to the schedule and guidelines? So, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of money. So if you're coming to the table every month anyway and reporting on how it was actually spent and what took place, kind of doing the work already on a monthly basis. So, is it possible to try the quarterly for the first year? And if it really is that much more work and you're not able to do it, couldn't we change it year 2, or entertain changing it?
I think that if we're struggling with it at the beginning, that's gonna be the problem. And so, our only thinking with the 6 months was, that massive reporting, which is fine to do, is going to be time consuming, and the manpower at this stage of the game, at least this initial year, is lacking. So, absolutely, we'll give you the 6 months, maybe we need to catch you up before the second payment, and that's fine. And then we'll have someone here monthly to say, look, this is what has happened.
I guess that's just where I'm confused. It sounds like you're coming to the table anyway monthly with the information.
Right, I agree. So,
Well, why don't, how about this? How about, Liz, how about we consider keeping this as is? With the understanding that since you're gonna be here monthly anyway and reporting, I just think it might work better if we keep it as is. You're gonna come back here monthly, representatives of the coalition. If there's a, we'll try it out, there's compelling reasons to modify the arrangement, I mean, we'll consider modifying the arrangement at that point in time. But I think for our purposes, I guess kind of what I'm sensing, what I'm hearing is that it's important to kind of keep this structure the way that it is. Not to say that we won't be inflexible in the future, but I think we need to try it out. I'm sensing we need to try it out as is, and then see where it goes. That's just my sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking I should have breakfast.
I think I agree with our attorney on this. I think that, I mean, I don't wanna get involved in semantics, but I mean, if the final report, if you wanna put it that, the final report is every 6 months, that's fine, but I think the idea here was that we have at least a quarterly plus the monthly way of this, and I'd be reluctant to change it. That's my position. I'd be reluctant to change the wording as it's been presented.
Well, how do you feel about that, remaining quarterly during, this is the infancy of the agreement, so.
And I understand where you're coming from on that point. I think if you'll allow us, we'll be happy to try that and use every effort that we have to do that. And we'll be honest, when we come monthly, if this isn't working, can we talk about the fact that we may need some help on this? Maybe we need trimesters, maybe we need 6 months, and this is why. So we'd be happy to keep it quarterly, but have open minds with the fact that we may need to discuss the feasibility of it.
Okay. And then the last item is either the entrance or exit data collection at the hockey games. Do I have that right, Liz? Or is it 3 items, the 3 main items?
Right,
You wanna,
the zip code and
you want, right, you wanna, is it your position that you wanna be relieved of that obligation? If you're allowed to use occupancy tax funding to promote hockey, the answer to that is yes, that's what you'd like, but you would like to be relieved of the obligation of collecting data from the entrances and exits during the hockey games.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it goes back to the same feasibility point.
I disagree.
I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't. I'm just trying to get the point out.
I wanna see that data. I don't care where you get it from as long as it's reliable. Whether you do it exit entrance polls or have some promotion where you can get some of this, I'd like to see that data. I think that's the problem we had when we originally talked with the mayor, and not my mayor, Glens Falls mayor, Diamond Jack. They couldn't give us any information. They had nothing that they could give us, and it was really frustrating. So it's important, at least to me, I think.
Perhaps one suggestion there, the way the agreement is structured currently is that at every hockey game, there's someone at every entrance, every exit, get that information. And so perhaps maybe if we, have a different idea, that we use our best efforts to survey those in attendance at hockey games for zip code and hotel, But to pinpoint us to a certain number of people that have to be at each game, at each entrance, at each exit, again, back to manpower, and I'm not sure that we have the ability to do that yet.
But, the way the contract is currently written, the hockey games are not described as an event.
Correct.
So right now, the way the contract is written, you do not have to take that kind of data for the hockey game, the number of people and the zip codes and so forth, correct?
That's not clear.
Yeah, that is, I think Supervisor Strau is correct. I think if you're going to say that we wanna use funding for promotion of hockey, I think you then kinda have to bifurcate and say, but we're not going to collect the data. That's what I understood the argument to be. Supervisor Strauss is correctly interpreting the agreement, as written.
Elizabeth, how many entrances do you have prior to the game? I mean, I've always gone in the front doors there. Do they let people in other doors?
Say six,
The
right?
thing about the tickets too, I don't know if you're familiar with, but Miller purchases 6 tickets. We also have a whole, I don't know, 100 or so of those flex tickets that they just throw in. And there's no way to really, I mean, you can tell that Miller buys 6, but these flex tickets that we hand out to people, if I have field crew coming up from Mississippi, and I give, 6 flex tickets for Friday and Saturday night games for the next 3 weeks, you'll never know that these guys are heads in beds, and they're out of town, and they're at the hockey game, just because they're throwing in these flex tickets. I mean, that's just one example of heads in beds going to a hockey game that you'll never be able to track via zip code.
I appreciate the problems here. I'm just trying to think of some way to get to the bottom of it.
I think
I
there's
mean,
6
if you
or
had
8 entrances. I'm just trying to think, as I go to the games, there's big double doors.
Right.
There's at least 3 big double doors, if not 4. And they're open, and it comes at one time. So, 8, would you say? 8 entrances across the front?
6 main and 2.
But don't they funnel everybody through 1 or 2 doors for the hockey games? You don't have all of those doors open.
To the main.
Like 2 on one side, 2 on the other. There's
Yeah.
4 right there.
You've only got 2 kinds of people that go to the hockey games. You've got season ticket holders and people that buy tickets for each individual game. They have to purchase a ticket from the box office. The season ticket holders are listed, there's a whole list of them. The Flames have got that. They know where they come from. And, the box office people that sell the tickets, could be easy for them to, when they're selling tickets, give a shit code, click, boom, just mark it down. Ticket takers don't have to do it, the gate doesn't have to be manned. The hockey games, I think, would be the easiest place to accumulate that data because of the season ticket holders and the box office.
Can I,
Good point.
Still missing the meals and whether or not they're staying overnight.
What's the answer?
would it be possible to take a percentage, like a sample, 10% of the attendance is one possibility?
Well, that was part of
Or
my
20%.
suggestion, they get some professional help, if you could get some kind of statistician in there to tell you, here's the best way to generate reliable information.
They'll know almost immediately what the overall number is. So if you had, I mean, with season ticket holders, a lot of them hand them to other people. Relatives come in, and that sometimes puts heads in beds because you have people coming up.
That's what we're looking for.
And sampling might.
Yeah, but go back to the mayor though, and same thing, what we could do is do it at the box office, get those, you know what the total attendance is, and you know what the attendance is there, and there's where you draw your stat from. In other words, if you got 3,800 people in there, and 200 of them are box office walk-ups, and we have their zip codes, we know we're collecting that percentage. I don't know if that's gonna be good enough, but that's what we have. Is that good enough? Is that a good enough?
Well, at this point in time, any information.
Well, I
think merely we're looking to reduce labor costs. So when we see on the contract that they're asking for every entrance to be covered by someone,
asking for zip codes, we're seeing dollar signs of labor, and we're trying to cut labor, not increase labor, and that was the reason why this was being asked
Well,
to be.
my point in offering percentages is not to say this is the way to do it, but to, offer another option, 'cause this is a work in progress. Say the thing slows down, the operation as they're doing tickets, maybe this would be another way of, I mean, would that be acceptable if in good faith they can't get it through when they're purchasing tickets?
Right now, I don't have.
I don't think it'd take much time at all. Ticket taker, just write down, what's your zip code, 12804. That's it, and write it on a piece of paper.
Well, I think it would be good if you could give us some scenarios of what you can do.
That would be fine, and we could
Yeah.
say, and I've tried to say, we'll use our best efforts to collect this information, it's important to us, and this is what we're doing to collect it, we'll report on that monthly. These are the things we have in place, the ticket taker's doing it, ask if they're staying in a hotel, ask what their zip code is, but just to be flexible in our ability to collect that data versus mandating certain number of people at certain spots.
Well, I think Frank's point was well taken, and, I mean, it can't be that many restaurants in Glens Falls that you could.
There are a lot. I think I'm sorry. I think you're already going to prepare an attachment for how you're going to use occupancy tax funding to promote hockey, right? On that very same attachment, you could set forth how you intend to do this tracking. You could send that to us for our review, and you've got some great ideas here. And within the body of the contract, we can simply refer to we can refer to that attachment, that exhibit, for both purposes.
Commissioner, a thought here, I think we're getting caught up in the precision, and what's hitting me is maybe it's absolute precision about how many beds are sold may not be material if an adequate number of beds are sold for the purposes of the law, at least as I understand it. So what that means is, if you start with collect walk-up sales, get zip code data, and if that provides reasonable evidence that there are enough travelers coming in that are likely to spend the night, then you can default to, therefore, we're selling enough beds in a hockey game that for the purposes of the committee, it's okay. If this first step through the box office sales comes back, it appears to be inadequate. Of 200 walk-ups, only 10 were from more than 50 miles away. That, you may say that's not enough evidence, so therefore you'd have to look for other ways to count. Because I'm understanding the issue in terms of the labor and trying to get data from people that want to get in and get out and those kind of things. And I also think I understand the worries here about making sure the money that's been funded is being used properly. So the suggestion would be, take a step, use the box office sales as a proxy to see if it gives reasonable evidence of enough beds sold. And if you get comfortable with that, it's done. You use that and you're finished. If it comes up short, then it would seem that the committee would have an obligation to look for more data.
To your point, I think that, I'd be remiss if I didn't throw in a plug for our local college. You've got amazing interns and business programs, and in a quick 2-second conversation, Fred had suggested even, employ these interns as a project. Go around, do a random sampling, use an iPad, ask them, did you go out to eat, are you spending the night? But use that to supplement your initial data. And then that will, in essence, let us know that by approving this money to be spent on hockey advertising, we're really getting a bang for our buck. And at the same time, you're using the college.
Again, another great idea. We just want the contract to be flexible to allow us different types of ideas. That's where we're.
Agree with that.
Okay. So, we're down to advertising professional hockey. quarterly reporting, and, collection of zip codes, possibly?
Well, I think they're going to set forth, they have some ideas here of the kind of tasks ahead to gather that data. And I think what you're saying is that you're not necessarily, you understand that it's not necessarily the need for having people man, the doors, the entrance and the exits, and there's going to be other reasonable means, to use Elizabeth's terminology, to collect that data, including some of the ideas that were discussed here today. But I think they need to sort of formalize and finalize that into an exhibit that would be attached to the agreement that sets forth precisely what they're going to do to gather that data with respect to hockey, which they've got to prepare, send to us, we'll distribute, perhaps comment on, and then have that ready for the February 20th meeting. That's my thought.
Okay, do you need a resolution to that effect?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Seconded by Ron. Any further discussion on the issue?
Don't let me know.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, we thank you for your time and effort. We have one more item. Tanya's been waiting patiently, about to burst. Reconsider application for Destination of New York's Warren County FAM Tour, $5,000 from discretionary fund. The FAM Tour is one of those events that falls under no particular town. So, the application should be considered in the discretionary fund. What's the feelings of the committee?
I'd like to support that. The one we held last year was pretty successful, and we got a lot of, Tanya back.
I just got back from American Bus Association, where I got to meet with a lot of the operators that came on the FAM for 2014. Currently working with about 5 or 6 that are definitely coming for this year, and some that are coming in 2016, working on the current itineraries for them. Just keep in mind that American Bus Association has reported that every time a bus comes to your area and they stay overnight, that's approximately $10,000 into the local economy, with the attractions, with the lodging, and with meals and things like that. So I'm just here to reinforce that it is an important part of promotion to the group tour industry. It's one of the most successful ways to get operators to experience a destination that they've never experienced before. They cannot sell to their clients if they haven't experienced the destination themselves. So, like Gene said, he did participate last year. We saw a lot of municipalities within the county. I think the only exception was we didn't get to Hague, but we saw a lot of great things, and I think it's an important event to consider for funding for 2015.
All right, I'll move it.
Moved by John, seconded by Gene. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Against? Carried. Motion to adjourn? Second by John.